My name is Debby Haskins. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, and I've worked in the substance abuse field for 30 years now. And when I hear that, it's just like, wow. I do prevention, intervention, treatment, have been on lots of committees on the state, and I've known Robin forever, and it's just an honor to be down here. And first, I want to thank you all for two things. One is, thank you for the weather. I come from up north, and we still have snow, so this is amazing. And when I come to Brattleboro, it's like a little mini vacation. 65, 70 with motorcycles out. I love it. Two is, I'm really honored to be here to talk about something I'm so passionate. And I talk a lot with kids about this, but I want to thank you for taking the time tonight to come. You came for a reason. Would anyone care to share why you came and you wanted to hear for youth in particular about this topic? What is it you hope to gain before you leave tonight? Yes?
I'm a teacher and I overhear teenagers talk about it's just...
Okay.
And I just want one little sentence to say.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I've been in the classroom talking to 7th and 8th graders all week, and I have another 10 shows to go, if you will, to talk about the #1 topic that's going on in schools. But we're going to wait on that for just a minute. I'm going to leave you teased a little bit here. As a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, I see everything from tobacco smokers right up through to those using heroin and fentanyl. And I've been seeing it for years. But it's much like I talk to students, is you'll hear me talk about and show you some things that everyone starts with the first of something. So a drinker who has a substance use disorder for alcohol starts with the first drink. The smoker starts with the first puff, and it progresses from there. And not everybody has the same illness, nor does it impact everybody the same way. I wish I could have been here when John was here. He's one of my favorite colleagues, and I listened to him talk, and I just felt so good after John talked. I just thought, God, he knows so much, this man. And he and I used to go on the road kind of together and talk about this. My question is, was anybody here last time and heard John Searles? Okay. Can anybody remember a fact that he told you? You don't count. Nope, you do count. But you're a plant. You're a plant. You count very much. I didn't mean it that way.
There was one about the cocaine use for young adults was 10%.
Which means it's pretty high.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that. My point in this is, you probably will not remember the few slides that I have that are statistical, but you sure will remember my chicken head. And there's a reason for that, because I'm going to show you some things tonight. We're going to talk about this right here. We're going to talk about the human brain. And you're a teacher, so you'll probably, if you will, just give me the fingers up, it's different in a kid. If you're sitting here thinking about marijuana or substances as yourself, I want you to just throw that right out the door. Because this isn't about you. And whether you've got teenagers or not, this is a whole new world. And the industry is marketing to our kids. If I'd have come down here a few years ago, I'd had a little tray of alcohol, sweet flavored drinks called Alka-Pops. And I would have talked to you at length about how kids are buying them and drinking. And all schools are calling me now to talk about is marijuana and vaping. Because it's the device. You heard some things from Robin and from John that really have changed our culture. And it's important to pay attention to it. So #1, when you hear the words, this isn't the pot of past, oh my God, you have no idea the concentration that kids are getting into and what it's doing and the psychosis it's causing. So let's dive in. This is where I live. This is what it's eventually going to look like. It's frozen right now. Your perception is wonderful. My perception is it's going to look like this very soon. And I sure hope it does. Somebody please just tell me, and we're going to build on this, what is prevention? We hear it thrown around. The legislators love talking about it. We're going to do prevention. And we're going to do, I don't mean to pick on you, but we're going to do it in schools. We're going to do it in communities. Somebody tell me what prevention is. For anything. How do we prevent something? Education. How else? Because education alone won't do it. Because if it did, we'd give you all a little handout and send you a packet and say, here, now you've got the education. Just read it, go home and do it.
Modeling.
Modeling. Oh, are you referring to adults maybe doing the modeling? Yeah, huge piece. So what we show our youth, they learn, and they're learning it great across this country, unfortunately, and I don't mean that sarcastically. What else is prevention?
Support.
Support, can you say a little more?
Supporting healthy choices.
So I got to know what those choices are in order to support them. Meaning you as an adult and you as a kid. So absolutely. What else? Let's add one more thing. What is prevention?
Social norming.
Say it again.
Social norming.
Social norming. So 1 out of 4 kids right now is vaping. That was 2 years ago. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey, when it comes out this year for Windham County, is probably going to show probably 2 out of 4, maybe even 3 out of 4, but we need to know the information. So you're absolutely right, we need to know information, but information alone is not enough for prevention. We need to work as communities, and I hope that's why you're here tonight, along with some wonderful refreshments, and it's a beautiful evening to walk out, is to find out, how do I really prevent something? By not doing it. It's that simple. It's that simple, and it's that hard. And what do I mean by that? There's a lot of factors that play into substance use. The first one you can't control. It's your genetics. You're born with the gift that keeps on giving. If your parents or grandparents have mental health issues or substance use disorder issues, or your grandparents, you inherit those. And there's nothing you can do about that. Just like if you inherit a predisposition to diabetes. But there is something you can do about the behaviors that are associated with this. And that's what we're talking about tonight. True prevention is about what I tell kids is a good critical choice. So I want you to be good critical thinkers, just like I want our kids to be good critical thinkers. So there's 3 things that I always talk about. The number one thing, and we've just done it here in Vermont, is we've made an availability source for all kinds of things, but in particular marijuana. We've just opened the door. Now, you might not be concerned about that. That's your choice for you as an adult. But this brain hasn't finished forming. This 3-pound brain that is an adult size is only about 2 pounds 8 ounces, and it controls everything a kid does. So when you ask your teenager, if anybody here has a teenager, or a grandchild, or a child coming up, why did you do that? They can't tell you a lot of times. And they can't tell you not because they're stupid, but because their brain hasn't connected that far yet. It is up to us as adults to make sure that they're safe. And I often talk about one of the things that we do when our children are little is we put up gates and we put up locks and we put up things in our house to make childproof. Anybody do that with their kids? Childproof. And when they went to visit somebody when they were real little, we checked out the other parents. We made sure that our kids were going to be safe. Well, they have never been in such environments as we're talking about now with the substances that are there. So availability is key, and I tell parents this all the time. If there aren't any substances, kids can't use. It's that simple. So I brought a nice little assortment here. When you come up and get your handout, please feel free to take whatever you'd like. There's 3 different products. Now I know which one you're probably going to take. Now if you were kids, you'd be taking the gummy bears. And the problem with that is gummy bears are being marketed to kids with THC in them. High concentrates of THC. So I gave these to a bunch of kids the other day and I said, so how many of you read the package? And they said, well, we trust you. They don't know me from Adam. I just met them. We trust you. You wouldn't give us anything. How do you know? Your best friend's going to give you something. You see, it isn't going to be a drug dealer. It's going to be someone who's going to give them something. And we need to read what's on things because these are coming through. Not those personally, by the way, if you take those, but they are eventually going to come through with all kinds of products. We need to know that an adolescent brain is different than ours. Sometimes they are incredibly intelligent and able to think through and get to the consequences, but most time, not necessarily. And then we need to think about critical thinking. What is critical thinking? Well, critical thinking is, my next slide, of course, is the brain. The brain controls everything, and you know, we know so much more than we used to know. When I first got up here and started talking 30 years ago, we didn't know anything. We couldn't do brain scans, we couldn't check to see what was working, we couldn't actually follow drug use, but we can now. We've gone from looking at why people use drugs to looking at the brain to actually identify what's going on in the brain. That's huge, but we still can't stop it. That's even a bigger issue. We can't stop it. So when I think of the brain, and I actually have a handout for you in just a moment. When I think of the brain, I'd like actually a volunteer. Who would like to help me demonstrate a child's or a teenager's brain?
I'll do it.
Okay, hang on just a second, Cassandra. Cassandra, what I'd like you to do is
Put a chicken on the head.
wear my chicken hat. You willing to do that?
Sure, I'll do it.
Okay, before you do that, I'd like to ask some questions from the audience. Who didn't raise their hand? And in fact, if I go to you and ask you to do this, you won't absolutely. You're cringing right now. You're thinking, no way am I wearing that chicken hat. Anybody here got those thoughts? Is anybody wondering why I want Cassandra to put this chicken hat on? Okay, let's talk. What other questions come to mind with this chicken? What's something you're thinking about right here?
What are the heads?
Thank you, thank you. But you're still, okay, so I want you to hear that. So in your head, you're just kind of saying like, you know, like, wow, where's this chicken hat? That I can tell you a 7th grader could care less. But the nurses that I do this with, they're thinking lice. They're thinking lice. So where's it been? Okay, great question. What else? What else?
Why?
Why? Exactly. Why would this woman come down to Brattleboro, go 2.5 hours, and ask Cassandra, or anybody, to wear a chicken hat? Good question. These are critical thinking skills. And for those of you that are cringing, it's because the oldest part of your brain's working and saying, no way, I am not getting up and making a fool of myself, or I just don't want to wear the hat. Now, Cassandra, you said you'd be willing to wear this. Mm-hmm. Would you wear this anywhere?
No, I would not wear it.
You wouldn't. Where wouldn't you wear it?
I wouldn't wear it where it would potentially ruin my credibility.
Oh, beautiful. So you're probably not going to go out for a job interview. You're probably, and maybe, I always do this next one and I shouldn't, probably not going to go to the president's and sit with the president with this chicken hat on. I will tell you unequivocally that teenagers will tell me they will wear it anywhere, at any time, no matter what. And actually, Cassandra, thank you for volunteering, but I'm not going to ask you to wear it. It's to prove a point. It's the way an adolescent brains work. They're not thinking of where it's been, or why I want them to do it, or where they're going to wear it. They could care less. That's dangerous. You see, our brain in the very center has the oldest part. It's called the amygdala, and it's no bigger than a nut. And that nut controls our safety. And so today on the way down, and this is a true story, a guy pulls out, and I nearly hit him, and I slam on my brakes, and let me tell you, my amygdala was moving. I was just like, there was a few words that came out of my mouth, and then he pulled over and gave me the finger like it was my fault. My amygdala was working because there was a fear factor. That's what we adults have. We think about things and we think about consequences. Young kids don't. And though those teenagers, and I got one who's a grandson, he's about 6'6", he's about this tall now, and I look at him, it doesn't compute the consequences sometimes. It's up to his parents and the adults in his life. We used to say 6 other adults really need to be in a kid's life. So we know that this is really important. These 4 things. Again, I always think about availability. If I don't want to eat chocolate in my house, I don't bring it home. It's that simple, because I'll eat it. When someone's getting sober and clean, who drinks, we tell them, get rid of all your booze. Don't have it there. Don't have it tempt you. So availability is key. How parents approve or disapprove. What they say matters. What you say matters. If I give my child or my grandson or someone in the community permission, and it's okay, geez, I'll pick you up anytime. It's okay, you're going to drink. Parents tell me this all the time. You're all going to drink. Well, our statistics say all kids aren't going to drink. How many of you would say, you know what? There's a whole percentage of people that are going to shoot heroin, which is true. How many parents tell their kids, Well, I know you're going to probably shoot. It's a chance. It's okay if you shoot heroin. Just call me. Nobody would say that, but somehow we perceive that alcohol and marijuana isn't quite as harmful. And yet, in my head, whether research totally supports this or not, people would argue with me, it's a gateway drug. All of these are gateway drugs. Because they open the door to being around those substances. And I still have a choice. The question is, am I going to make it? When kids tell me about vaping and pot, all my friends are doing it. I say, well, you're in the wrong party. Because the party you're at, all your friends are doing it. The kids that aren't doing it aren't at the party. They're doing something different. Not all the time, but some of the time. Parental supervision. Oh my God, I read about a woman in the paper. She had 30 kids in her barn. She never went and checked on them. And guess what? They were using. Well, wherever there's kids, somebody's going to bring in substances. That's what kids do because they're not thinking through. So you need to check on them. It's a simple matter. You don't let them go. And then, and Robin mentioned this, if we perceive something as harmful. Now, for those of you that like chocolate, you'll come up here and you'll get chocolate. If you're diabetic and you know you're not supposed to be eating chocolate, this is harmful for you. If it has nuts in it, and by the way, some of them do, so be careful here. If we have a nut allergy, we need to know that if it's harmful, it may be harmful to somebody else. It isn't the same. Now, this is where when somebody raises their hand and they all tell me, some kid tells me, or some adult tells me, they know of somebody who smoked or used all their life and they're just fine. There's always an exception. The norm is most of us fall in the middle. And while everyone isn't going to be addicted, it's going to cause some harm, and I'm going to show you how. So we know in our field now that when you use substances, that most everybody mix several substances. Rarely does someone, I have not seen anyone come to my office for treatment who has an alcohol abuse disorder. They all have anxiety and depression, most of which is left untreated. They're using alcohol, they're probably smoking pot, and they're trying to manage their stress, as they tell me. And I only feel good when I'm under the influence. That's when my symptoms go away. I sleep better, I don't have any anxiety. Well, no kidding. The only problem with that little detail is you've always got to be under the influence because you don't have the skills to deal with the anxiety and the depression. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So Tom Delaney, who is also a data guy and works for the Vermont Child Health Improvement Program, collects data. And he put together some of the youth risk behavior survey. And again, the only reason I put it up here was to show you that Windham County here is pretty much like everybody else as far as binge drinking. I mean, you've got Essex County, which is up in the Northeast Kingdom's a little higher. But our kids are binge drinking. 5 or more drinks in a row in one sitting. And I always think about that and I think, my God, that's in a small liver that's not fully developed. I would be wasted with 5 drinks in a sitting. And a lot of you that weigh 160 pounds for men, you women don't even count because you don't even have the enzyme in your system to break down this alcohol. And if you're Native American or Asian, and I am one of those, then you would not also have the enzyme in your system and alcohol would impact you different. So think about that. 5 drinks, 4 for women, makes binge drinking. So that's what our kids are doing. And as you've already heard, they're smoking pot. Well, they're going to smoke it, Debbie. It's legal, and it's going to be legal as of July 1st. And there's going to be a huge availability in their homes because people can grow it. What does that mean for kids? Well, for those of you that don't know, an ounce of dope, which I didn't bring and I usually do, is $200. That's what they sell it for, $200 in schools. This is what I do for a living. I go into schools and help schools. We know that there's a correlation, not causal. So critical thinker knows this. They know about research. They know enough to know that you read lots of studies. John Searles talked about reading the study, of which I'm going to put a couple up, just a little bit of stuff. 180 studies he read. And they put together a committee and they put that data up there and they gave it to the governor and it was clear that it was going to be detrimental to youth. We still passed it anyways. My concern is that kids are going to have psychosis because that's what's happening, because this drug is 21% more potent than anything we've ever seen. And if it's in a concentrate, up to 90%. And if it's in an oil, which when I get to talk about the vape pens in a minute, and the new pen that's coming over from California, see, Canada can't sell vape pens with pot in them yet. So they're selling them to California. So as soon as they get to California, they're going to come across the country like our meth did, and kids are going to be able to buy a cigarette that looks like this which will have 200 hits of marijuana for $100. They'll be able to put it in their pocket. Oh, I'll put it over here so I don't knock you silly. And they'll be able to take it to school. The difference between a vape pen is a vapor exposed, and you won't know because you won't have any smell and you won't see anything. It's all about devices and potency. And the potency of this is incredibly high. So, just look at the right. Right here we talk about suicide. The rates of kids that use substances, not only do they not finish school, not only do they get poor grades, but they attempt their own life on their own life more. Because it's a drug that takes away a feel-good chemical called dopamine. And it depletes kids of it. And it depletes adults of it. Different body, different brain, different chemicals. Real important to think about. What adults do is very different than what a youth does. Tell me a fact that you know about tobacco. One fact. It's addictive.
Cancer.
Causes cancer. One fact.
Causes heart disease.
Causes heart disease. How do you know that? How do you know it's addictive?
Seen it in my family.
Seen it. How do you know causes cancer?
Studies.
Studies.
Research.
Plural. Research. What is research? Kids have no idea what research is. What is research? Is research reading in the Times Argus or what's your paper down here? I read it all the time. Brattleboro Reformer. Reading one article with the headline that says marijuana is not addictive. Is that research? Because they cite one study? Research is amazing to me. I always think I wish my professor at college could see me now because I did so poorly in research. I get it now. You have to read more than just the one headline. Because marijuana is not good for PTSD. Marijuana does not help with anxiety. Marijuana does not help with sleep disorders. People think it does. It's called the placebo effect. If I was stoned all the time, I'd probably be feeling pretty good too. I wouldn't drive so good though, and I probably wouldn't be quite so clear. When we talk about vaping, we know that a lot of products are brought in. Now the first one is, and get this, there are 7,000 flavors of oils, which are non-regulated from the FDA. Doesn't touch them. You have some here right in your local shop. A group of us went down to your local vape shop, and he was incredibly knowledgeable, and we could have vaped all we wanted for free because we're over 18. And there's a lot of products in there that are cotton candy, Dr. Pepper, root beer. Who are they marketed at? Bubble gum. Not you, not me, not even the teenagers, little kids. The flavors are designed to be sweet, overpowering, and to get kids involved. We know that a quarter of the kids are already doing it, and that's 2 years ago, and it's going to be a lot more. Why is it so important? Now, most people don't know this. Most people don't know that most people don't drink to excess, that only 5% are dependent, maybe another 20 or so are at risk that cause some car crashes and do some things in families. So we've got about a quarter of the people that drink cause 80% of the problem. That's not prevention, by the way. That's the reverse. We're paying for that. Our society is paying for that. Our families are paying for that. Most people either drink responsibly, and we could have a conversation about what that means, but there's a whole group of people, now maybe you know some of them, maybe you don't, that are abstainers. Why would somebody abstain from alcohol? What's one reason?
They've seen it in their families.
They've seen it in their families. Ooh, they've learned. So that's an adult talking. Why else? Yes.
They can't process the alcohol.
They can't process it. Yep. Why else?
They have some kind of medical condition.
Medical condition. Keep going.
Religious,
Religious. You haven't got the big one yet, though.
recovery.
Keep going.
They may do things they wouldn't otherwise do.
They know that too, absolutely, but you haven't got my big one, my favorite.
They don't like how it makes them feel.
They don't like it, or even more importantly, they don't want to do it. They like being drug-free. I always put that option on the table because we need to understand that's an option. You don't have to use drugs to feel good. I can get as much dopamine as I want without any drug and no side effects. All I have to do is do a ropes course or dive in the water or do something that I do and do well. That produces dopamine. And the good thing is it doesn't damage my body, which drugs will. The brain, the body. So let's just talk for a moment about stress. Anybody here have stress? Oh, good. I'm guessing that laugh means that some of us have something that goes on, right? So you're here tonight. How do you manage your stress? You don't have to answer that. But think about this for just a minute. Stress is a very interesting word. It's a word that we hear everywhere and we use all the time. And it's an excuse. Pardon me, but it's an excuse. You may disagree and it's okay. But what I mean is an excuse for is I have stress, so I need to therefore use something. Now, I always talk about this. I was just telling Robin, I had great anxiety before I came here. I speak all the time to kids, but I had a lot of anxiety because John came before me, and I know and I trust John, and he's well respected. And I thought, oh my God, John's already been there. Wow, what am I going to tell these people? And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to listen to John, and I did. And then I thought, well, that's John, this is me. I'm going to share what I know. And what I know, a lot of you don't know, and that's okay. That's why I'm here. But you learn to share what you're good at. Anxiety is a part of life. Stress is a part of life. And it isn't whether you're going to have it. It's how to manage it, how to deal with it, how to understand it. And I just talked to the young man. Wow, talk about smart. He gets it. He gets it. That this is a part. Toxic stress. You can't, I told a group of kids, 300 kids on Friday, on 420, you can't change where you live, but you sure can change your head. You can't change when you're growing up if you live in an alcoholic home or you live with somebody with mental illness, but you can change how you feel about it. And your feelings do not damage you. It's what you do that does. And that's real important. Because I hurt, because I'm uncomfortable, I can choose to take something, or I can learn to deal with it. And so for those of you that are making some assumptions, oh, she's never felt real pain, or she doesn't know what she's talking about, I do. I broke my arm, I'm having some pins out, I know what pain is, I know what stress is. I have all the same things that you do. I know what suicide does to a family. I know what alcoholism and mental illness does. I've learned how to live with it. Different than taking the toxic stress and trying to get rid of it. Because you never get rid of it. Just like you don't get rid of anxiety or stress. You learn about it. So teaching kids that is incredible. So this just came out on Monday. And this is from the United Kingdom. And then they're having a terrible problem over there. Everybody likes to think of other countries and everybody's got it right. Nobody's got it right. And when we talk about marijuana, there's been a lot of conversation about Colorado because, of course, Colorado is first and they've got this social experiment and there's some angry people about that. How dare you have a social experiment with people that die, because we've got parents whose kids have died because they've been psychotic. How dare you talk about a social experiment with my kids? A social experiment is where there's a control group. It's not where you injure people. So this isn't a social experiment. But what we know is 91% in the UK of those folks are getting treatment. And it is the number one reason why our kids get treatment. And if you heard John anything, he was saying, but it takes them longer to get there because the symptoms are different. Very important. We laugh about addictions. And if you know anything about them and you've lived in them, nothing's funny about them. And death is the final piece, but it's not the most difficult. Living with an active person who is struggling with an addiction because it's a brain chemistry, it's a physical illness. It's not just willpower, and that's true for all addictions. So let's talk about this guy here, or woman, or person. What do you think this bear is feeling? What do you think?
Really cool.
Really cool. What else? What's the bear feeling? Say it again.
Wiped out.
Wiped out. There's no right or wrong answer. What do you think the bear is feeling?
Really?
Yeah.
Relieved. One more.
At home.
At home. Truth is, we don't know. We'd have to ask. And I'm not sure I'd be able to tell, but although I understand with animals you can tell a lot. What we know is that his or her or their dopamine is probably at a low level. You know, we all have that. Sometimes it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes it's first thing in the morning. Our dopamine levels, dopamine and serotonin are two chemicals, what I call feel good. And in the morning, if you sleep well, you wake up and there they are, just greeting you every day. But sometimes you don't have enough of them. You're not born with enough of them. Or sometimes you use substances and you deplete those. They disappear from your system. And the problem with that is you can't always get them back. Now, people that run know that if they run, they get a dopamine high, a serotonin high. Well, I'm not a runner, so that doesn't work for me. But we know that you can do all of these things. It has been proven that if I say thank you to someone, my dopamine levels are going to go up. If I'm grateful, I mean, the recovery movement is not a big deal as far as AA knows that if you give thanks to someone and you help someone, you're going to feel better. The premise of their program is pretty basic and it's wonderful. It's worked for years. It's about these things: acting kindly, saying thank you, being able to show some of these things. Whether it's playing music or being artistic or whether it's just being you and being comfortable in who you are, you can access your own chemicals, which is a great thing. And it can save people. So here's what the brain looks like. I'm going to actually ask you if you would hand those out. Here's what the brain looks like and where cannabinoids. And for those of you that don't know, our body makes a pain chemical similar to cannabinoids. So let me just be clear. The marijuana plant, the cannabis plant, which everybody's calling it now, it's a pot plant, is no longer the pot plant that you and I think of. It's genetically altered. What do I mean by that? The seeds have been altered so that the potency is incredibly high. They're usually grown in water, not dirt. It makes them more potent. They're cultivated, manufactured, and extract an oil out of them as well. So the oil is even more dangerous than the plant. Why is this important? Because that's what's being used in vape pens. The concentrated form. Our body experiences pain, and there's a reason for it. When you hit your thumb and you experience pain, it's to tell you you just did something to your thumb, and pay attention to it. When you take an opiate or you take pot, it disassociates you from the pain. You still have pain, but you just don't feel it. That's dangerous because pain tells you something's going on with your body, and it's an important sign. This is vaping. For those of you that have watched somebody go down the street, by the way, it's illegal to vape in public. It's very interesting when you come up to a car that's got a sunroof and they're vaping because it all comes out. My husband said there were 4 kids in the car and they were all vaping because when they got out of the car, it went like a mushroom. Problem with that is every kid in that car is getting the same 4 chemicals, whether they inhaled it or not. Whether there's nicotine in it or whether there's flavoring in it, it is not water vapor. It's an aerosol that they're inhaling, and it has 4 chemicals. All of them have 4 chemicals, which they don't tell you. Glycerin, propylene glycol, diacetyl, and formaldehyde. Okay? So the last one everybody pretty much knows about, formaldehyde, you know, the one that pickles things. But let me just tell you a little bit about glycerin. Glycerin's made by melting animal fat with lye and adding salt to it. And when that drips down, it forms a nice gooey liquid. That's what they're putting in these pens to inhale and suck on, along with the flavorings. No wonder they've got flavorings. They have to. Now, all of you knew something about tobacco. We have spent billions of dollars retraining everybody, after we believed all the lies, that it was safe. So let's go back historically. People were given, in particular in the beginning, men, in World War I, tobacco products. And it used to be, and the industry knew this, The industry knew that if we gave it into a bag and people rolled their own, it was going to take a long time when you're in war. So they pre-rolled them, and they put 20 in a pack, and they gave them to every soldier that went in World War I and World War II. My father was a recipient in World War II of his first pack of cigarettes. He ended up coming back addicted to them because, you see, they do take care of your anxiety for a very few minutes. And then now we know they have additives to them. My father died of lung cancer. He never smoked before he went into service. We don't do that anymore. But what's important to understand about the history of it is it was marketed as safe. Even doctors told us it was safe. It took us 50 years. We sued them because people started dying of cancer. So we learned that there was a lie going on. I won't be around to hear the next lie, but I can guarantee you what it'll be. Marijuana will be the next big tobacco. Because if you follow it like I do, you know that the three top companies, Marlboro, Camel, and Winston, are fighting over it, along with the alcohol industry, which is Anheuser-Busch, because Anheuser-Busch already has a beer with pot in it. They're waiting to manufacture it. So think about this. When and this is actually from the Vermont Department of Health, the health impact report that John was talking about. And I know you can't see all of it. All I want you to see is right here. Perception of risk, access to the drug, and the marijuana industry and tourism are the top three things that have to do with the scope of marijuana and what it's doing to our kids. All the rest is how it impacts the brain and what it does to the body. The Surgeon General already knows that e-cigarettes are dangerous. But I can tell you, you go into any school today, and in middle school, 1/3 of those kids have already tried it, and they all believe it's safe. And their parent, they can't buy it. Can't buy it unless you're 18. Either their parents are buying it for them, or they're getting it from their siblings or someone, and they're using a product, and if you look at the bottom one, the secondhand smoke, the aerosol that's coming from a vape pen. So what does a vape pen look like? Well, as I said before, a vape pen used to look like this. It had a chamber, you put oil in it, has a heating element, you have to charge this. These are pretty heavy and they're pretty expensive. The industry knew that that wasn't too cool because eventually kids weren't going to want to carry that around. So they made them in a lot of colors, and they made them in a lot of styles, and they made them so you could throw them away. But the most clever one is the Juul, because the Juul doesn't need a battery, and it's quite slender, and you can stick it into a computer and bring it into school, and then you can inhale on it and blow it down your shirt, and nobody knows you're stoned. The pods that go in them are this big, and they're equal to 1 pack of cigarettes. 1 pack. And when I ask the kids, how many of you know somebody who's smoking a pack of cigarettes? Nobody could raise their hand because they don't know. How many of you know if somebody who's vaping? Every hand went up. 5th graders, 4th graders. This has gone since 2003 when it was first invented to in our backyard. And what concerns me is that when you use concentrated forms of nicotine, you can die from it. Never mind heroin, you can overdose and die from nicotine. And our kids have access to these. So one might ask how that happened. Yes?
So we actually, our tobacco prevention coordinator purchased a Juul.
Yep.
Juul's supposedly has some kind of a way to prevent people from purchasing. They
Buy it online?
But yes, he went on eBay, and there was 6,000 options. We used our credit card. We got it mailed to us. So now we just purchased just a generic card. So we're going to purchase that. It's like cranberry flavored. Yeah.
So what kids have learned to do is they get a gift card, and then they can't be tracked. Yeah.
So I just wanted to let people know that that's how, and there's no FDA regulations on it, so.
Nothing about this. But they're safe, aren't they, Debbie? That's what they'll ask me. They're safe, aren't they? They're natural. They're okay, aren't they? They're better than cigarettes. Robin already talked a little bit about, so one thing is that drugs change the way you perform in school. Duh. That's a no-brainer, right? You're not as focused. You're not probably as attentive. You probably aren't doing your homework. That's not true for everybody. There are certainly students that are outside that box who do very well, stoned, very well, you know. The difference is they'd do even better if they weren't. You know, I kidded a moment ago that I'm going in for surgery. It's no kidding. I'm going on Thursday. And I asked my doctor if he smoked. Because I got to tell you, I want him sharp on Thursday. He's going to be cutting into my arm. I don't want him drinking. I certainly don't want him. You see, marijuana is fat soluble. So it stores here. It stores in kidneys, it stores in livers, it stores in all of the organs of the body. What does that mean? Every time I dose up, it's not like alcohol where it leaves me. It's not like alcohol where I perspire it off or I pee it out. It's not an alcohol-soluble thing. So that within a certain period of time, you sober up. If I smoke, you know, Robin was talking about 20 days. That's 42% of the month. My brain is soaked in THC. Why is that a problem? Well, for one thing, I don't see the same. My peripheral vision changes when I'm on marijuana. And I can tell you, if I'd have been on the interstate today and I'd have been stoned, that car that pulled out in front of me, my reaction time would have been 5 seconds. And I'd hit the guy. No question about it. 5 seconds. I barely had that. So when kids tell me they drive better, it's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Get into the simulator and see where you're not going to hurt somebody, because this is a drug that changes the way your brain has a reaction time to it. Harder to detect. We know it affects grades. So this health impact report, and John talked about it, Vermont Health Impact Report, Google it, comes right up. What it shows is marijuana is connected, correlation, not causal. It doesn't cause all these things, but kids that are at high risk tend to be in these categories. Bullying is there, suicide is there, misuse of prescription drugs. All of those things kind of go together. Teachers tell me in 3rd grade they know this stuff.
I just want to
Yes.
go back to that, because
You can.
I've been waiting for, I wanted the 0 times. We didn't have the 0 times. We had when we got ours. And we're
Oh, right.
But I think that's so important, because that 1 to 2% is obviously a lot better than
Right.
20 times, but you can just see
how it
much
goes
the
up.
difference. And I think it's so important, because you think about how feeling sad, right? Like,
Yep.
your kid could be 10 times more likely to be sad, even if they're just smoking once or twice a month. You know, it's
And still not.
yeah, it's like, you know, when you, some of these things, it's like, why are they, people think, oh, well, it's because they're teenagers, they get all these emotions, or, you know, we talk about, I just think this is a big piece in how we can help our kids just not just deal with their stress, but also know how much of
Absolutely.
that emotional stuff is going on, because, you know, we can't say it's that, but it's definitely something to, it's better to not smoke pot and take a less chance of feeling suicidal or, yeah.
Yep.
I just want to put it out there, because
No, it's a great comment. I think you have to, again, you're talking about levels of risk, and you're an adult, and your brain goes that way. Meaning it goes all the way around to the front, to the prefrontal cortex, and it says, oh, level of risk. This goes up. That's pretty obvious. This is pretty obvious.
And look at the prescription drugs. As
Exactly.
Opioids, 6% if they've never used pot versus
Yep.
59.
And it goes to 59. It's unbelievable how it changes. So think about the numbers, and what we can do about it is the bigger question. Here's what really gets me. These statistics. John probably would have my head because they're not all in a chart. But if I use weekly, I'm much more likely to be depressed and anxious. The very reason why kids use is because they're depressed and anxious. So the root cause to me is we need to help people understand when they're depressed and anxious, to find out if it's clinically depressed and they need medication or not, and what's going on when they smoke pot. They're much more likely to have suicidal thoughts. This bears out in Vermont. And what really scares me is Vermont, for 12 to 17-year-olds, we are second highest for this age group to attempt suicide. And for those of you that don't know anything about suicide, 2 people in Vermont, adult, all ages, take their own lives from suicide. Every single week in Vermont. Perception? I'm on the Child Fatality Review Committee. I see these statistics. We talk about these kids. They're real. And this is going to increase, which I actually quite aptly told the governor. It is going to increase because we're going to increase availability of a drug that increases this. Not causal. But this last one, schizophrenia, absolutely causal. and correlational, meaning the more you smoke, the more likely that if you've got schizophrenia latent, that it's going to blossom sooner and it's going to impact your life. Because it's so strong. It's what they call skunk. So, less likely to graduate from high school, more likely to be dependent. Robin referenced, if you start using in middle school, 12 years old, so these kids that are juuling, they're already on this little path. They're 4 times more likely to have a disorder by the time they're 18 or 19 because their brain hasn't finished growing. Prevention? You bet I don't want kids to use. And I'm right up front about it to kids. I don't think it's going to do anything for your grades. I don't think it's going to do anything for your sex life. I don't think it's going to do anything for your relationships. And it's surely not going to help you physically. But they got to figure that out. And they're much more likely to attempt suicide. And the biggie that we talk about, use other things. Because the pathways in the brain have already changed. I'm used to feeling what we call a rush or something. You know, I was telling a kid this the other day. A month ago, I gave up all sugar. First 3 days, I thought I'd die. And the kid says to me, you have to have sugar to live. I said, actually, you don't. So I'm not sure where you got that statistic. You can live quite fine because there's a lot of sugar in foods naturally. These kinds of things. We think that what we put into our body isn't going to impact us. And when you get more my age, you know that everything you put into your body impacts you. Let me just talk about PTSD. A lot of people read studies and they say that marijuana, and I'm not even going to discuss this tonight other than saying this one sentence, medical marijuana is the cure-all for lots of illnesses. Not in the research I see. Not in the Journal of American Medical Association, not in the Center for Disease Control, not for the National Institute of Health. Maybe if I go to High Times, maybe if I listen to someone who smokes a lot, they feel better. I get that. But that's not science. My experiment, my conversation about this is not science. Science is repeated over time. And when you look at the studies, what we see is 1/3 of the kids who are using pot already have anxiety and depression that's not diagnosed. So the kids in middle school and high school that are getting diagnosed with this sometimes get put on medication, and guess what? They don't like the symptoms of the medication. So they stop using that and they start using pot because it makes their brain feel better. And they're absolutely right, it does. But it also addicts them at the same time. So here we are talking about opioids, and here we are talking about cannabis. This isn't actually a great slide, but there were 2 different pieces, wave 1 and wave 2, were 2 different times where they actually collected data. And what they found out was that obviously that if you're a very frequent user up here, you're more likely to use opiates. It's a no-brainer to me. Makes sense. All my clients have done that. And most of my clients that started using opiates did it because of pain, because they went to their doctor. I'm not faulting doctors. I had this big conversation with my doctor this week. You need to sign the opiate form. No, I don't. Yes, you do. I said, I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. I'm not taking opiates. Thank you very much. She says, you still got to sign the form. I got to give you all the information and you got to sign it. But that's how most people with real illnesses get addicted to opiates. They get injured. Back, knee, arm, leg. They go for surgery. And so now our doctors are educated and they don't prescribe. He says, I'm only going to give you one. I says, well, you're not going to give me any because I'm just going to do just fine. Thank you very much. Because opiates are incredibly addictive. But for certain kids and certain populations, even more so. So the kid that is smoking cigarettes, 95% of the time will go on to something else. So when I see a kid who's smoking cigarettes, I'm worried. But they're not smoking much anymore. They're vaping. They're vaping. So, that's me. That's my conversation about this whole topic is whenever we talk, and we've been spending a lot of time in this state talking about opiates, and I've had several clients die from opiate addiction. Fentanyl, carfentanil, ingesting heroin, shooting heroin. Not one of them, this is anecdotal, this is not science, but not one of them started with that. They all started with pot. They all started with pot. And they will tell you that for them, it was a progression. And now that it's going to be legal, they're worried about their progression starting again. So what questions do you have, and what would you like to add?
Can you talk about the driving a little more? Only because I feel like that I was doing a DLC training, Department of Liquor Control training, and one of the bartenders thought that it was okay. One of the bartenders thought it was okay
Because you
for
drive
people
slower.
to drive high. Like
You
they're
drive
like,
slower.
well, you know, that's different. So this isn't just kids thinking this. This is adults thinking that people.
Well, you want to. So you know, here, two things. The liquor control, as you know, probably, has vision goggles for what it's like being impaired from alcohol and what it's like being impaired from marijuana. In fact, at the school I was at on Friday at Virginia's High School, the kids were just coming back from that, and they actually got to experience texting as well. So they got 3 chances to, and I asked all the kids, how'd you do? Oh, I really sucked, is what they told me. I didn't drive very well. But there's a perception. Now think about this. THC goes to the part of the brain that changes your perception, how you see things, but also how you think about them. Time and space is changed. You think a half an hour has gone by and it's really been an hour, or you think an hour has gone by, it's only been a few minutes. Your perception changes. So you're thinking you're driving, and you may be slower, and so that therefore makes it better. But like I said with alcohol, I see double. So any alcoholic will tell you this. It's good to have a white line because you got 2 of them and you can follow them. And you hope that there's lines on either side so you can get within the lines and you can get home. It's no joke. This is what they'll tell you. Somebody who's stoned doesn't see any of this. So all I see is my path down here. And I've got a 5-second difference. And NHTSA talks about this, the National Highway Traffic Safety Association, I think it's association, does a study where it actually shows the difference. But to convince a kid who wants to believe that their marijuana is helping them drive slower, because it's better than alcohol, because they've seen crashes from alcohol, you have to know I have a real bias. I worked at Harwood Union High School. 5 kids were killed in a car crash by a man that was high on marijuana. All 5 of those kids are dead. He didn't see very well that night. He was going the wrong way on the interstate, and they were certainly in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that was what was in his system. Did it make him a better driver? Not that night. So some people will tell you that they can drive better. Research shows they can't. Do I argue with them? No. But it's a great question. It's a great question. If I use, and I want to use, I can find you all the research to support that I want, that I could, it's okay. It's kind of like how we justify when we're speeding on the interstate. You know, I'm only going a little over the speed limit, and everybody else is going faster than I am. And I've got my seatbelt on, and, you know, they don't bust you till you're going 71 or 72. Well, they do, by the way. So, you know, I mean, you justify what you want to do. If you're an adult and you want to use, I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem when you get on the road, because I drive these roads and it makes it unsafe. Anything makes us unsafe. Opiates, prescription opiates. If you read the bottle, you shouldn't be driving with them most of the time. And most people do because they've got to get somewhere. I get that. But it's still a danger.
And I think that was scary with the data that we got last week, was that like almost 50% of people
More kids are driving.
18 and 24 were saying they were getting high.
And I heard the question.
Getting higher, and then they were driving.
And I'll tell you why that is. The alcohol industry did a phenomenal job of talking about a designated driver. And bars will pick you up if you're impaired, and they'll take you home now because they don't want to get the lawsuit against them. It was a smart advertisement, but it was meant for adults. The designated driver is an adult issue. So people learned through lots of ads on TV, oh, you don't drive drunk. So the kids thought, well, I won't drive drunk. I'm the designated driver. I'll just get stoned because I drive better. So there's not that message there yet. We've got a lot of work to do in that one because they are driving impaired more so.
I think you were talking about grades when you said the rationalization is, well, I get good grades. You said, well, if you didn't use marijuana, you get better grades.
Better grades.
I think the same applies to driving. Somebody may be not so bad driver, but they're not up to their usual game if they're using marijuana. They still may be average or even better than average. but not as good as they would be.
Exactly. And you know, the other thing I was just thinking as you were just talking, which is a little bit of a sidebar, you know, Vermont talks a lot about, and our governor talks a lot about how we want kids to go to college. How many of you know that half the kids that go to college don't finish? They don't finish. They drop out for a whole bunch of reasons, but they drop out. So I would much rather have a kid take a year off, go to college and finish if they want to learn something in education, not just go to college. So you need, the only reason I make that statement is you need to know what the rest of the sentence is. You need to know what exactly. Would I drive better, and what risk am I taking with this 3,000-pound vehicle along the road? Well, I got home safely. You know, I've worked for 30 years and heard every excuse there is. I see DUI clients. And now I see DUI clients and they're impaired from marijuana and fentanyl and other things. Rarely alcohol, because they know about alcohol. They'll get caught. Remember, a lot of this is you don't smell it, you don't see it, and with vaping, the eyes aren't red, there's not an odor of marijuana. It's also done one other things for our police officers. They no longer can stop a car and search it. Because now if an odor of marijuana comes out, it's legal. So we've just, and you guys are in a corridor from 91 up, where a lot of things come up through here, come up my way. And they could, if they stopped somebody and did a search, there was some information, they'd search a car with permission, and they'd see other things. Now they're not going to be able to do that around the marijuana issue.
I thought the law prohibited smoking pot and driving.
Well, it absolutely does. Just like we have a law that prevents texting and driving. Do we see anybody texting and driving? Raise your hand if you've seen somebody text and drive today. So, you know, I worry. I agree, absolutely there are laws in place. I don't think we're going to be able to ever get ahead of it because there's going to be so much more. But maybe I'm wrong. My officers don't tell me that, but maybe I'm wrong. There's a lot of laws. Most of them are going to be unenforceable. There's a law that says after July 1st you can grow 2 marijuana plants and 4 immature plants. And you have to have them in your house. And I can't go in your house. Not as a police officer. It's against the law. I can't search your house without probable cause. So I can't go and find out if you got 15 plants. So we've got a few things we need to work out.
So Deb,
Yes.
there was a question at the beginning from the teacher here.
Oh, yes. Question.
That you wanted a quick answer to the student that,
Oh, yes, to the student.
that it's not that harmful, right?
Yeah, it's just pot.
And I hear that from parents.
Yep.
And I hear that from, you know, that, which is why we called this tonight. Well, at least they're not using heroin. So,
Right.
because we are talking about teens here.
We are talking about
And-
teens. We're specifically talking
So
about teens.
what is that quick?
So there's two things. So the first off, as I would need to know the context. If it's in a classroom, I'm probably not going to single out a kid. I'm going to talk to them. Actually, there's a lot of reasons, and I would love to show you the research and have a conversation with you after class about why I think this is so harmful. However, you seem to feel that it's not a problem. Tell me how you came to that conclusion. Doesn't make any difference what I think. Really doesn't. I can give you every fact, and most of you won't remember any of these tonight. It matters what you think. So I want to know what this young person thinks. So if I knew him well enough, I'd say, tell me how you got to that conclusion. Where did you get that information? Oh, my friend just, or whatever they say, you know. And then I would ask, is that the data you're going to rely on? Is that the most reliable data? And how will you know? The other question I often ask anyone that says, you know, it's not a problem, how will you know when it's a problem? What will it take? What are you willing to give up? That's how I usually answer it. Now remember, there's a whole group of kids that are going to bait me and bait you about, but they're already telling you something by talking about it, and it's great. So maybe I want to refer them to someone in the building. I'm not sure which school you work in, but so they can have a further discussion, not necessarily in your classroom. Or maybe you feel perfectly confident and just after class talk to them about it.
This happened in a drug education class.
Yep, okay,
Yeah,
so
I
it's
was
pretty,
visiting.
so it's pretty
It was
okay.
just like amazing.
Yeah. Kids will say, by the way, I've spent 30 years listening to kids talk about this. So when somebody says to me, if you tell them you're a drug and alcohol counselor or something, they won't talk, they will absolutely tell you everything. because they want you to know. They do want to talk about this. But I want to have a real conversation. So I'm asking this young person how they got to that decision and what are some... The other thing I often do for teenagers is I ask them to brainstorm. Let's imagine you had all the money and you were going to buy a car. Let's talk about what that car would look like. So we brainstorm, if I've got time. We brainstorm all the things they would like in a car. What do you suppose comes up for a teenager when they start talking? They got money, so money's not the issue. What are they looking at when they think about this car?
Sports car.
Sports car, color, what else?
Sound system.
Thank you, sound system, and now it's all the other gadgets go with it. Anything else?
Fast.
How fast it is, absolutely. Never once do they, now let me tell you as adults, when you go look for a car, if I tell you you have all the money, what would you look for in a car?
Safety.
Safety, what else?
Reliability.
Reliability,
Gas mileage.
gas mileage, none of those things do they care about. My point is their thinking is very different, so I want to know what this kid is thinking, what he's willing to kind of risk. And I play devil's advocate. It's called motivational interviewing. Have you thought about this? What about that? So you're willing to give up your sports team. Oh, I don't, you know, everybody uses, really? Boy, wow, that really is impactful. Would you like to read an article that I've got about this guy that just got kicked out of? You know, I'll never forget when I saw one, I mean, please don't hit me. I'm a Yankees fan. And my grandson, when he was in high school, was a Yankees fan. And he couldn't imagine why you would get on the Yankees team and ever use. It just never made sense to him. You made it, you got the pinstripes on, you're out there playing. He said, what is he thinking about? Strawberry, Darryl Strawberry. He gets kicked off the team because of drugs. So then we had a great discussion about it, about how it's brain-based and about what went on, and it wasn't about the Yankees, it was about his addiction, whole conversation. That was more impactful to him than if I'd have given him a handout. You will not remember the statistics. You don't need them. You can get those anywhere. You can download those, you can talk to Robin, you can talk to Cassandra, you can get those anywhere. What you need to think about is, what are you going to do with this information? If you've got kids, you better be having conversations, because they are. And I'm telling you, they're having them. They're using, those fifth graders in this little school in the middle of nowhere, they know all about vapes. Someone said, "Oh, you can't bring in vapes to show them." I said, show them, hell, they're going to show me how to use them. I had an 18-year-old in one of my groups. His mother was there because she wanted him to stop vaping. He's 18, he can buy them. So he came in and he showed all the rest of the teachers about the vapes. I didn't have to worry about it because he was talking about how they all worked. But when he left, he was wondering if maybe he ought to change. Whether or not he will. Nicotine, 7 times it takes usually. It takes a lot of stuff to get you off of nicotine. So it's not just alcohol. Last question, and then yes, sir.
Yeah, science says that nicotine is effectively as addictive as heroin, and
Yes.
in some ways even more dangerous, even though it doesn't kill you as fast. But science has never said that the active ingredient in cannabinoids, or THC, is physically addictive like heroin or nicotine.
Yes, they have.
They have?
They have. Now, I have all the studies. So it can be
It's
addictive.
classified as a narcotic?
It's in class 1. It's a Schedule 1 drug still.
Oh, that's a federal law.
Yeah, it's a federal law.
But
So,
doctors didn't write that law.
well, actually, doctors shouldn't be writing some of this, and doctors actually shouldn't be talking at the State House about this. Some of what we're talking about is what is in the marijuana plant, the cannabis plant. There are levels of THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, that are highly addictive. And the reason they are, and I don't know if you were here for the earlier part of my conversation, is because it's so concentrated. And because the seeds are grown differently now than what they were, and the concentration levels is we're now seeing, if it's not a problem, then some people probably wouldn't have psychosis. Some people wouldn't end up in emergency rooms. It's highly toxic to children, young children that are actually eating gummy bears because they're getting hold of them because they have THC in them in Colorado and California. They're ending up in emergency rooms as poison. Do I think it's addictive? Absolutely, because I've seen it.
But actually,
It isn't-
it's like a narcotic, because when I've tried both, Vicodin, and I've never had
Yep.
heroin or whatever, but I can see how cocaine and heroin can be physically addictive. And
Right.
you get the Jones as a
Right.
but
It's a
that
different-
doesn't really
it's a-
happen with
you're right.
cannabis.
It's a different addiction. It's a totally different animal, if you will. And it's a different withdrawal symptoms. What we see for people that withdraw from cannabis is they have difficulty sleeping, they have anxiety, and they're more restless. Most of those you can manage either with something else or, and just remember, we're talking about adolescent brains, we're not talking about your brains. Your brain's different than these kids. And the other thing about that is they will manipulate along with THC. You got to understand, they're drinking energy drinks. They're drinking Mountain Dew. So they're putting tremendous caffeine along with the sugar in with the THC. So do we need more studies? Absolutely. And right now, the federal government, whether you believe it or not, is doing one of the biggest studies we've ever had. They're following 10,000 kids for 10 years. And it's going to be remarkable what we learn from those 10 years, because it'll be the first study ever that's tested this level of marijuana in kids and followed them. See, a short-term study doesn't do much.
But chemically, there is a difference between physical addiction of heroin and nicotine.
Physical, yes, but can you be addicted?
Then the kind with
Absolutely.
alcohol, which is not
Yep.
a narcotic, cannabis, which is
Yep.
not a narcotic, and chocolate, which I'm looking at that.
That's what this is here, yeah. They all have their properties, you're right. They all have their properties, and you're absolutely right. Do they do different things to the body? Absolutely. But the difficulty for youth and their developing brain and body is it changes pathways. It doesn't just, again, you got to understand, an adult's brain is fully formed at 26. A youth brain is not fully formed. And so those, and we're actually going to see, I didn't even talk about this, technology is another little conversation that we could have, that's showing some of the same symptoms as some of these drugs.
What about heroin addicts? Do you think it's a good thing to find that heroin addicts can help wean themselves off of heroin by using cannabis?
I disagree. I think for a very slim population, and I don't think it's the cannabis, I don't think it's the THC. See, this is where people get it mixed up. Take the CBD, the cannabidiol, have it tested, take out the THC, which gets you high. I think the CBD is going to show wonderful things. And I'm clear that that's going to happen in 5 years. That's what I think is going to make the difference in heroin. But remember, for some people, they will need a replacement drug. We've done it for years with women on estrogen. We gave them a replacement drug. Now we're talking about it with addiction. The question is, and some people struggle with this, is whether you want to replace one drug from the other. And I've seen great success with people doing Suboxone, but can all of those be manipulated and used? Absolutely, and dangerously so. So we've got another question, then we'll come back. Yes. Good questions.
I hear about synthetic pot
Yes.
versus the regular, and I've seen kids becoming psychotic.
Oh, well.
But somewhere I heard, and I haven't researched or anything, that the plant has something in it that's more of a antipsychotic, like a psychotic protectant, and then
Well, that's the CBD.
synthetic doesn't or something?
Yes. There's CBD 1 and 2, which are cannabidiol pieces to the plant. And those, I think, are what you're talking about. And in the purest form, I think, but we don't have the purest form on the street. What people are buying, this is what worries me. Everybody that's taking CBD and thinks it's the most wonderful thing since sliced bread, they're probably not even getting CBD. They really aren't, because it's not being tested, and we don't know the strength. So I'm all for it. Let's get the strength, let's get it right. But they're different products that you're talking about. Synthetic is always different. Always different.
What about the federal law that classifies it as the same as heroin drugs, where because that it created that stigma, we can't grow hemp because it has a tiny bit of.
We're going to actually, that's actually going to change. Our governor is going to sign a law probably this year that we're going to be able to.
Sure, the federal government stopped that in 1937.
But we do lots of things, including legalize marijuana, that the federal government says we can't do. So we'll do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Ropes and hemp. I know of people who are growing hemp now. Have been for a couple of years up in the islands. So it's being grown. Whether it's legal or not, I don't know. And nobody's being prosecuted over it. So another good question. Totally different plan, the hemp plan. Last question, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Sandra or to Robbie. Anything else anybody would like to ask? You've been great. Yes, young lady.
I was just curious about like how much of the social environment is considered because the kids who are exposed to marijuana in the first place are with families or in an environment that they would be exposed to
Good point.
they would be not doing well in school.
All of those
They would
things.
be depressed and all of that.
Yep.
So like I was
42%.
wondering if there was like
42%.
a way, an approach that addresses.
When you look at all the factors that impact, 42% of a family's environment impacts my use.
Right. So I was wondering if there was an approach now where you could take a more holistic view of prevention rather than saying.
And that's what true prevention is for all of this. Not just for substance abuse, for trauma, for sexual abuse, for all of these things. And that's why prevention is so important with the coalition, is it's not just in schools that we teach it. It's parenting. When I think of true prevention, it happens long before. So as a young child growing up through, before my first relationship, in the first relationship, after the first, before the birth, all of that's prevention. It's circular. It's that holistic model that you're talking about.
Because I was looking at the tables and I'm like, the kids were exposed to marijuana, their parents probably don't care that much about them. So
Very much so.
Depressed.
And so those kids are showing up at school unprepared, struggling, having a higher need level already by second or third grade, not reading as well. And we're going to perpetuate. We're going to continue to see that until we make the change. So you're absolutely right. And if we had the answer to that, we'd all be in a lot better place. So if you solve that, you want to work with these two ladies here, Robin and Kavina, and everybody in this room. Yeah, I kind of thought so. But you're absolutely right. It's, oh, good. So thank you.